According to Wikipedia, typology in Christian theology and in biblical exegesis is a doctrine or theory concerning the relationship of the Old Testament to the New Testament. Typology is very useful for grasping truths about the Catholic faith because it is both at the same time simple and profound. Through typology, people, places, and events from the Old Testament are seen as a foreshadowing or a prefigurement of people, places, and events in the New Testament. Typology uses storytelling to deepen our understanding about the Catholic faith. And this is much like the approach that our Lord took to explaining truth, as he spoke in parables and in stories so that everyone could understand. Please listen prayerfully and open your hearts to see the typological prefigurements that lie waiting for us in the Old Testament. Before we examine how the Protestant Revolt was prefigured in the Old Testament by the rebellion of the 10 northern tribes, I would like to offer an idea. The Old Testament contains the entire history of the Israelites. The Israelites were the Old Testament people of God. Their entire history, from their inception until their ending, is completely contained in the books of the Old Testament. Similarly, the New Testament is the entire history of the new people of God, the Catholic Church. The New Testament really contains our history from start to finish. However, the difference is that for the Israelites, their history is entirely recorded in the Bible. Our history is still being lived out. We are still in the New Testament, even though our history is not recorded entirely in the Bible. With that concept in mind, it becomes clear why the Protestant Revolt would be prefigured in the pages of the Old Testament. If the Old prefigures the New, then events in the history of the Church would be prefigured by the Old Testament. It's not just people, places, and events from the pages of the books of the New Testament, but the actual history of our Church that comprises the actual New Testament. Now we are ready to look at how the Protestant Revolt is prefigured in the Old Testament by the rebellion of the 10 tribes. The rebellion of the 10 tribes of Israel was one of the most impactful and far-reaching events in the history of Israel in the Old Testament. The rebellion split the united monarchy of the 12 tribes of Israel. Up until that split, the 12 tribes of Israel belonged to the covenant that God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The tribes that stayed loyal to God's covenant were Benjamin and Judah, along with Simeon, who was absorbed by Judah. It was in the tribe of Judah that the temple was located and the Davidic monarchy. The 12 tribes of Israel were never to be reunited again. In fact, the 10 northern tribes that rebelled eventually became completely lost. From Wikipedia, according to the Bible, the Kingdom of Israel, or the Northern Kingdom, was one of the successor states to the older United Monarchy, also called the Kingdom of Israel, which came into existence in about the 1930s BC, after the northern tribes of Israel rejected Solomon's son Rehoboam as their king. 9 landed tribes formed the Northern Kingdom, the tribes of Reuben, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Ephraim, and Manasseh. In addition, some members of the tribe of Levi, who had no land allocation, were found in the northern kingdoms. The tribes of Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to Rehoboam and formed the kingdom of Judah, or the southern kingdom. Members of Levi and the remnant of Simeon were also found in the southern kingdom. In the second book of Kings, chapter 17, verse 34, it says of the newly exiled Israelites that were in Assyria, "To this day they persist in their former practices. They neither worship Yahweh nor adhere to the decrees and regulations, the laws, and the commands that Yahweh gave the descendants of Jacob, whom he named Israel." The 10 northern tribes of Israel were led in rebellion by a man named Jeroboam, who also became the first king of the northern tribes. He rebelled initially because the taxes were too high on the people of Israel, due to Solomon's building and expansion, particularly the heavy burden placed on the people to build the temple. For a video that shows all the amazing parallels between Jeroboam and Martin Luther, click on this link. After the northern tribes split from the southern tribes, it was the north that kept the name Israel. To distinguish themselves from their apostate northern kinsmen, the bottom tribes called themselves the Jews, after the tribe of Judah. Following Solomon's death in the year 926 BC, tensions between the northern part of Israel, containing the 10 northern tribes, and the southern section, dominated by Jerusalem and the southern tribes, reached a boiling point. When Solomon's successor, Rehoboam, dealt tactlessly with economic complaints of the northern tribes, in about 930 BC, the United Kingdom of Israel and Judah split into 2 kingdoms. The northern kingdom of Israel, which included the cities of Shechem and Samaria, and the southern kingdom of Judah, which contained Jerusalem. The division of the 12 tribes of Israel and the wars that followed between them severely weakened the 12 tribes of Israel, who were very strong under the reign of King Solomon. With the weakening of their economic and military power, other empires rose to challenge the 12 tribes. The apostasy of the 10 northern tribes and their abandonment of the Sabbath, their abandonment of the sacrifice in the temple, their abandonment of the Levitical priesthood, and their worshiping of false gods, brought down the wrath of the Lord. The Assyrian Empire rose. A series of invasions eventually led to the captivity of the Israelites. The Assyrians, who were especially cruel, practiced forced population relocation, and the 10 northern tribes were scattered all over the Assyrian Empire. They eventually lost their language, their identity, their customs, and their heritage. The area north of Judah came to be known as Samaria. The Samaritans shared many aspects of the Jewish religion, but they had pagan ancestors. They mixed the Jewish religion with other religions. The Samaritans only recognized the first 5 books of the Israelite scriptures, or the Pentateuch. They threw out the rest as being uninspired. From the second book of Kings, chapter 17, verses 4 through 6, and verse 24. And when the king of the Assyrians found that Osei, endeavoring to rebel, had sent messengers to Suah, the king of Egypt, that he might not pay tribute to the king of the Assyrians, as he had done every year, he besieged him, bound him, and cast him into prison. And he went through all the land, and going up to Samaria, he besieged it 3 years. And in the 9th year of Osei, the king of the Assyrians took Samaria, and carried Israel away to Assyria. And he placed them in Hala and Habor, by the river of Gozan, in the city of the Medes. In verse 24, And the king of the Assyrians brought people from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Emath, and from Sepharvaim, and he placed them in the cities of Samaria, instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria, and dwelt in the cities thereof. And from Wikipedia, in the year 732 BC, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III sacked Damascus and Israel, annexing Aramea, the territory of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, and Gilead, including the desert outposts of Jetor, Naphish, and Nodab. People from these tribes, including the Reubenite leader, were taken captive and resettled in the region of the Kubar River system in Assyria, Mesopotamia. Tiglath-Pileser also captured the territory of Naphtali in the city of Jonah in Ephraim, and an Assyrian governor was placed over the region of Naphtali. According to 2 Kings chapter 16 verse 9 and chapter 15 verse 29, the population of Aram and the annexed part of Israel was deported to Assyria. Israel continued to exist within the reduced territory as an independent kingdom subject to Assyria until around 725 or 720 BC, when it was again invaded by Assyria and the rest of the population deported. The Bible relates that the population of Israel was exiled, leaving only the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Simeon that was absorbed into Judah, and the tribe of Benjamin, and the people of the tribe of Levi who lived among them, of the original Israelite tribes in the southern kingdom of Judah. It was during this time of Assyrian captivity that the book of Tobit takes place. The book of Tobit tells the story of Tobias, staying loyal to the commandments of God, even though he lives in a pagan land. Also, the story of Sarah and Tobias' son is told, in which Sarah has 7 husbands who all die before they can consummate the marriage with Sarah. The 7 husbands are killed by a demon of lust, Asmodeus. Sarah then marries her relative Tobias, and finally gets to consummate a marriage. Tobias is not killed by the demon of lust. Now that we have accounted for various events that transpired during and after the 10 northern tribes of Israel breaking from the covenant of the Lord, and with the bottom tribes of Judah, we can move on to the story of the Protestant Revolt and the consequences and events that followed from that event. The Protestant Revolt was spearheaded by Martin Luther. He nailed his 95 Theses to the door of a church in Germany. One of his primary protests was his selling of indulgences, with the proceeds going to fund the building of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. For more on the parallels between Martin Luther and Jeroboam, click on this link. The scriptural and historical documentation to support the parallels are included in that video. Up until the Protestant Revolt, Christendom in Europe was united. All the countries of Western Europe were Catholic. The Protestant Revolt happened right at the end of the Renaissance, a time of great building, prosperity, and growth for Christendom. After Martin Luther's revolt, it was primarily the northern European countries that rebelled from the Catholic Church. After the split occurred, it was the Protestants that generally kept the name Christian, while those that stayed loyal to the Church adopted, primarily, the name Catholic as a way to distinguish themselves. The Protestant Revolt had many consequences for Europe. The Protestant adherents quickly became extremely scattered in their theology. The so-called Age of Enlightenment and its secular ideas found its way into various strains of Protestant theology, making a mix of religion. Martin Luther threw out all or pieces of 7 different Old Testament books. The Protestants lost their liturgical language of Latin, and over time they drifted so far from their origins that they lost their great Christian heritage, forgetting that they came from the Catholic Church. The wars which followed the Protestant Revolt, along with the disunity that now gripped Christendom, gave rise to foreign powers, both in the form of new ideologies and new empires. This period of history saw the rise of the Ottoman Empire, who made significant inroads into Europe. The Ottomans had a practice of forced population relocation and shifted around the peoples they conquered. The Ottomans were also known for their horrible cruelty to those they conquered. A future video will explore the parallels between the Ottoman Empire and the Assyrian Empire in much more depth, including an examination of the Battle of Lepanto as prefigured by King Sennacherib's attempted invasion into Jerusalem. From Wikipedia, in the 15th and 16th centuries, the Ottoman Empire entered a period of expansion. Suleiman the Magnificent captured Belgrade in 1521, conquered the southern and central parts of the Kingdom of Hungary as part of the Ottoman-Hungarian Wars, and after his historical victory in the Battle of Mokas in 1526, he established Turkish rule in the territory of present-day Hungary and other Central European territories. Finally, early on in this period, in the land of England, King Henry VIII was wanting to get an annulment for his marriage with Catherine of Aragon. The core issue in his argument for an annulment was that Catherine was married to his brother, who died. Since under canon law at that time, Catherine was considered a relative by marriage, Henry argued that his marriage to Catherine was null. Besides, Catherine never consummated the marriage with Henry's brother. From Wikipedia, Henry is known for his consequential role in the separation of the Church of England from the Roman Catholic Church. Besides his 6 marriages and many extramarital affairs, as well as his effort to obtain an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, which led to conflict with the Pope. His disagreements with the Pope led Henry to separate the Church of England from papal authority, with himself as king and as the supreme head of the Church of England. Certainly by 1527, he had convinced himself that in marrying Catherine, his brother's wife, he had acted contrary to Leviticus 20, verse 21, an impediment the Pope had never had the authority to dispense with. The Pope didn't grant Henry an annulment, and he went on to break with the Church. His lust drove him to kill some of his wives and divorce the others. In the persecution of Catholics that followed, many great English martyrs lived their faith in an extremely hostile environment. These saints included St. Edmund Campion, St. Thomas More, and St. John Fisher. A future video will explore the parallels between the Anglican split and the Book of Tobit in much more detail. Now that we have examined events following the rebellion of the 10 tribes, and that we have accounted events following the Protestant revolt, we are now ready to see how the rebellion of the 10 tribes is a prefigurement of the Protestant revolt. The rebellion of the 10 tribes of Israel was led by Jeroboam. The initial reason for the rebellion was due to heavy taxes that were levied to build Israel, particularly the temple. Jeroboam wanted to stop Israelites from going to the temple to offer sacrifice, and he stopped the Levitical priesthood. The Protestant revolt was led by Martin Luther. One of the initial reasons for the revolt was the selling of indulgences that were used to fund the construction of St. Peter's Basilica. Martin Luther wanted to stop the sacrifice of the Mass and also ended the continuation of the Catholic priesthood in Protestant lands. King Solomon's reign was characterized by a general peace, compared to the warring times of King David before him. During the reign of Solomon, the temple was built, architecture and art flourished, and Israel experienced its golden age. It was right after the death of King Solomon that the 10 tribes rebelled. The Renaissance was characterized by a general time of peace, compared to the warring times of the Crusades that preceded it. During the Renaissance, St. Peter's Basilica was built, architecture and art flourished, and Christendom experienced a golden era. It was right near the end of the Renaissance when the Protestant revolt took hold. The tribes that separated themselves from the covenant and rebelled were the northern tribes of Israel. The countries that became Protestant and followed Martin Luther were predominantly the northern European countries. Before the split, all 12 tribes were collectively known as Israelites. After the split, it was the rebels in the north that kept the name Israel, while the faithful southern tribes adopted the name Jews after the tribe of Judah. Before the Protestant revolt, all of Christendom was collectively known as Christian. However, after the split, it was generally the Protestants who kept the name Christian, while those who remained faithful to the Church distinguished themselves by using the name Catholic. After the split of the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom made alliances with pagan kings and empires. The Assyrians eventually invaded. The Israelites in the north eventually lost their native language, their customs, heritage, as descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. After the Protestant revolt, Protestants stopped using Latin in their worship services. They began to drift theologically and eventually lost the great heritage of Catholic liturgical practices and their vast heritage as Catholics. After the 10 tribes rebelled, a series of wars were fought between the north and southern tribes. These wars weakened the 12 tribes and instilled a great sense of disunity among them. The 12 tribes of Israel were weakened, and foreign powers began to exert pressure. After the Protestant revolt, a series of wars were fought between Protestant and Catholic European countries. Christendom was severely weakened, and a great sense of disunity was instilled in Europe. Foreign empires and powerful secular movements began to rise in power. After the 10 tribes rebelled and became independent from the south, the Assyrian Empire arose. It conquered northern Israel, captured its people, and forcibly relocated them throughout the vast Assyrian Empire. They were scattered and broken apart. After the Protestant Revolt, Protestantism started a process of splintering. Eventually, Protestant sects became theologically shattered and broken apart. Additionally, at the same time, the Ottoman Empire was invading Central Europe. It also had a practice of forced population relocation, and it spread its captives around its vast empire. During the time of the Assyrian diaspora, the story of Tobit takes place in the north. The story tells about keeping faithful to God's laws in a pagan land. Tobias and Sarah wed after a demon of lust has killed 7 of Sarah's husbands before they could consummate the marriage with her. Tobias and Sarah are relatives. During the time of the Protestant Revolt, the story of King Henry VIII takes place in the north, in England. His actions start to the eventual persecution of Catholics. Great saints arise to keep God's laws in a very hostile environment. King Henry seeks an annulment with Catherine because she was married to his brother, but they never consummated the marriage. Then King Henry VIII exhibits great lust as he kills and divorces his many wives.